as announced tonight by last night by the program, passed away suddenly. Today, a basketball team is not just without a head coach. They are without a mentor, a man who took them in and helped build a community for them, a supporter of each and every one of them. A family and friends have lost a true loved one. Now, I'm not going to act like I knew John McSweeney. I never got to meet the man. Never did. I just started getting back into Seminole District coverage after being brought in by VTRN along with another radio station. But there are people that did get to feel the love and the special bond that McSweeney had with a lot of people here. Bob Alvis wrote about it earlier in a journal today about how he got to meet the guy that had 500 plus wins at St. John's, had a credible basketball career, came here. And according to an article written by our first guest who we're about to bring on, athletic director of Liberty Bedford, when going through the hiring process, Aaron Hagler, said in social media 3 years ago he took a chance on a guy from Oklahoma to lead the basketball program. 5 minutes into the interview, I knew he was our guy. He took a chance on us, packed up and headed to Bedford, and boy, was it paying off. Heartbroken and a loss to hear of his unexpected passing. To bring on somebody outside of Bob Alvis and many who knew them, Bryson Gordon of News and Advance now joins the show to talk about John McSweeney in remembrance. Bryson, first off, hope you're doing well, man, and staying safe on these icy conditions. But Liberty Bedford right now, they weren't going to play either way because of the snow. But if they could have played without the snow, do you think that game would have gone forward? Or do you think, in remembrance of the beloved head coach, that it was probably best to move that game either way?
Yeah, good question. I think, I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, I given the circumstances, probably would have been a night to not play basketball, thinking about Coach McSweeney and, obviously a lot of what we do is about sports, but in general, it all comes back to everything, everything that goes on in our, in the personal lives of a lot of people we cover. That's bigger than sports. And so, the death of a guy like Coach McSweeney, who was great to me, great to a lot of people in the Lynchburg media scene, just thinking back to some of our interactions. It's obviously, very tragic and, probably would have been a night for us to put the basketball scene on hold in the first place because it was such a big loss.
Bryson, you've been covering for high school sports since you came to News in Advance, Liberty Bedford being one of them. Can you talk about your interactions with John McSweeney to let people like myself who didn't get the chance to know the man know what he was like on and off the court?
Yeah, Coach McSweeney was great. Like I said, I had began covering him last year. Last season was the first time I had the chance to meet him. Was Seminole District Media Day, not this past season, but at the beginning of the 2024-2025 season. And he was great, like I said, with me and all the other Lynchburg media people. He always talked about the tenacity that he had wanted to have in turning around Liberty, and I think you could definitely see that he was starting to do that this past season. Obviously, winning 10 of their first 12 games. Just going through, some of my memories with him, I know there might have been some people that knew him a lot better than me, but every time I ran into him, we talked about basketball first. I just think back to some of the memories of, seeing him at games this season. I bumped into him a couple of times and I was out watching some games for coverage. And he was just there scouting opponents. And he never wanted to talk about anything but basketball. It was always about, high school basketball around here. Obviously Coach McSweeney wasn't from the area. He moved here from Tulsa to take the Liberty job, like you were reading about. And so, a lot of this area was new to him. So, we would always talk about what we knew as me being a newer guy as well. We talked about some of what we've learned from being around here in a short time. And he was very tenacious in building his program, and a guy who the players certainly looked up to. I remember talking to a couple of his players after a game against Heritage last week, I guess 2 weeks ago at this point. They talked about how much they enjoyed playing for him, how much of a tough coach he was, and how much he really motivated them to be better versions of themselves and to work really hard. And I think that was why it was a big turnaround going on in his program, is because everybody was willing to put the work in alongside Coach McSweeney.
Bryson Gordon of News in Advance has agreed to join on the fast lane to remember John McSweeney, for the people that knew him, such as Bryson. Bryce, what is the community like in Liberty Bedford? Have you been able to go up there and talk to anybody, or have you spoken to anybody since last night's announcement? What's the community reaction?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of surprise. I haven't been up there today, but you just see some of the statements rolling out from some of the other teams. Not even just at Liberty High School, but also around the Seminole District. I think pretty much every team has posted something about it right now, because I think there was a lot of respect. There was tons of respect for Coach McSweeney around the area, just considering what he was doing and the way he went about it, how nice of a guy he was. I think the school put out a letter to families today earlier talking about, how they had implemented some of their, crisis response stuff in terms of, giving counselors to students, because, Coach McSweeney was more than a coach. He was also, an in-school suspension coordinator for the last, I think, at least 2 or 3 years since he's been on staff there on the basketball team. And so, he was in the building, and somebody that, even more than the basketball players knew. He was a guy, if you read the letter to the family, somebody that, pretty much anybody that he came in contact with, had a good connection with him. And so, I'm sure it's a really shocked community in Liberty Bedford tonight. And I think it's going to be tough for them to get back to basketball. It all, like I said earlier, it all comes secondary whenever you have huge life moments like this. Despite all the good that's going on at Liberty right now, it's just hard to look past the unfortunate events that have happened.
Who do you think will take over in place of McSweeney if they do decide to continue to see it? I'm not going to say they're going to cancel because of this death, but I know that's probably not on. I maybe I'm overreacting, but do you feel like someone will take over for McSweeney, or do you feel like Liberty Bedford may put the season on hold? What do you feel like is going to happen?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think it might be too early to
Absolutely.
really know, because I think it really is going to come down to how these players respond to it, and how the school community at large responds to it. And it's been a weird week already. With obviously no action on the basketball court because of all the snow and inclement weather we've had. And I think with the events, it's probably going to be an even tougher week getting back into things for Liberty. And so I think that might be a call where we have to see what the program wants to do first. If players have the motivation and have the drive and desire to want to dedicate a season to Coach McSweeney and play, I think they should be applauded for that. That'd be incredible.
Absolutely. And it would be the story you didn't see coming if they continue on with the season and continue with the success they had. And he helped shape that program. I know you saw it firsthand. Liberty Bedford itself, and it's not just in basketball. We started seeing a little bit of it in football. But how much inspiration does John McSweeney bring to Liberty Bedford from this point on, not just in basketball, but in athletics as a whole?
Yeah, I think you're like you mentioned a little bit. You're starting to see a little bit of a turnaround in general with the athletics department there. Some of the teams, like the football team that has had a little bit of a rough stretch, starting to turn things around under their new coach Brad Womack, who was the interim last year. I think winning is contagious. We talk to coaches all the time. I think a lot of your guys that come on the fast lane and talk about high school scene will say the same thing. Winning is very contagious when you're in high school, just because it's a feeling. It's a feeling that kids can replicate, winning close games and stuff like that. And I think winning for a school is kind of contagious, and you're starting to see that kind of with everything going on around at Liberty. Even dating back to when the basketball team started to have a little bit of success last year. Obviously, the girls basketball team had tons of success last year and over the last few years, and then that's kind of translated into the football field, and that's rolled over onto the basketball court. And so, things like that are contagious. I think, obviously the legacy that he leaves is gonna stay with the basketball program for a long time. These players that are there, I know Liberty's actually on the younger side of some of the teams in the Seminole district this season. So, it's a team that's going to be back for more and hungry to compete. And, I think that, if you're looking at, where they go from here, I think it's a moment where it can maybe galvanize some of these kids to, really bond together and be even closer and create a much tighter school spirit out there.
Bryson Gordon on the fast lane. You can listen to him on the morning warm-up, another great show we have on here every Wednesday, talking about Liberty and high school sports. And even more so, you can listen to his articles on News in Advance. He posts daily and a lot of great stuff to read down there, as well as new Instagram, Bryson Gordon Sports, if I'm correct on that, Bryce.
Yes, sir. That's right.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Hey, Bryson, thank you for joining us, man. Can't wait to listen to you on the morning warm-up and some more Fast Lane appearances in the future. But thank you for helping us remember John McSweeney and the legacy that he's left behind, man. And stay warm out there.
Absolutely. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Bryson Gordon, News in Advance, joined us here on the show. And once again, all thoughts and prayers out to the McSweeney family and to the Liberty Bedford community. With that being said, we'll continue on with the Fast Lane with another Fast Five at 5-ish.
It's time for Fast Five at 5-ish. 5-ish minutes on 5 relevant topics done around 5 p.m.-ish. Ish, because our counting skills are kinda ish. Let's start with number 5.
So, Australian Open is finally reaching the conclusion. The betting favorite Sinner fell to Djokovic. Earlier this morning, ER time, and now Djokovic will be competing in the Australian Open finale against a common opponent, the young, rising 22-year-old star in Alcaraz. Carlos Alcaraz, who has made a name for himself completely. And a lot of people felt like maybe Alcaraz can make it to the final. Maybe it could be Djokovic. The betting favorite was Sinner, and now that's out the window for a lot of people. But if you are a betting person and you did vote for the favorite, who was Sabalenka, she'll be playing tomorrow morning at 3 in the morning, and that'll take place at 3:30, and then men's same time on Sunday morning at 3 in the morning. And we'll have more for that on the Fast Lane. I can imagine Ed's got a fast take on it when he comes back on Monday before we do Around the Commonwealth. But should be another good one. A lot of history on the line for both of these two. Grand Slams. Djokovic looking for his Grand Slam. Another one to add to the table. Carlos Alcaraz looking for his first. Meanwhile,
Number 4.
the IndyCar today announced a street race in Washington, D.C. Confirmed, not just by Penske, the owner, but it was executively ordered by Donald Trump to have a street race in Washington, D.C. as front stretch, as Tom Blackburn came out and wrote an article about today. Planned dates right now are between August 21st and the 23rd. A street race. We saw a couple of street races in NASCAR in itself, like Chicago, for example. So to see something like this, and not only that, but you've got Donald Trump, the president of the United States, going out of his way to executively make sure it happens. It's going to be interesting to see, you know. America celebrating its 250th birthday. What better way to celebrate than street racing? So, moving on now to
Number 3.
the NFL, currently discussing throwing flags on the field following replays that pertain to player safety fouls. This is going to include unnecessary roughness, horse collar even, roughing the passer, and illegal tackle. Jonathan Jones of CBS Reports came out today about that, meaning if in a replay that the referee sees a horse collar or so foul, he can still throw the flag afterwards. So you're talking about late penalties coming into the game after replays, which usually, idealistically, a lot of fans may not like late penalties, but for the player safety, the NFL is going an extra mile to make sure that player safety is involved at 100%. Speaking of the NFL,
Number 2.
the NFL informed all their clubs, every NFL team, that the salary cap increase is going to go from $300 million to $305 million. This past year, was $279 million alone. Can that get the Saints out of their negative salary cap debt? Maybe. I know one thing's for sure. It could help the Cowboys a little bit. Commanders, I know they've got, as far as salary cap goes, they're in a decent spot. That's our team in the backyard. Ravens are in a good spot right now, and we'll talk about both the Commanders and Ravens with our next guest in Joey Keller from the NFL when we talk about the NFL coaching carousel. Now, for local news, not just in the NFL, but for all the Wahoo fans out there.
Number one.
UVA alum Ian Cunningham has just been announced, yesterday was announced, as the new general manager of the Atlanta Falcons. Ian Cunningham played guard at UVA in the mid-2000s, and for the last 4 years, he's been assistant GM with the Chicago Bears that have been hoping to restore themselves to former glory, drafting guys like Caleb Williams, Trey Lyle's favorite guy, and as well as free agency and the big pickups like on a line and wide receiver DJ Moore and so forth. And they built a team that made it to the playoffs, beat their foe in the Packers, big rival foe, and made it to the divisional round, something the Bears hadn't sniffed in years. Now, you've got their assistant GM joining Kevin Stefanski with the Atlanta Falcons. Now you've got Matt Ryan, president of operations. You've got Kevin Stefanski, who a lot of people think was robbed in Cleveland as far as resources go. And now with the team he has in Atlanta, Kevin Stefanski proved he was a good coach, just in a bad situation. Not to mention the baggage that Kevin Stefanski, or luggage that Kevin Stefanski brought with him, like Tommy Rees as the offensive coordinator and former Notre Dame quarterback standout. With that being said, that is your Fast Five at 5-ish. Quick, relevant topics at 5-ish. We'll talk about Commonwealth teams' place, drive into the tournament, the NCAA tournament as far as that goes. What you can know is Liberty right now is on the roll to be an automatic bid. If they keep the pace they go, we know they could be first place in the Conference USA and potentially win the championship if they don't choke it away, and are destined for at least the 12th seed, the highest that they can go as an automatic bid group of 5 team in the tournament. JMU at this point would have to win their tourney. UVA and VT's path is interesting. UVA, they're at least projected a top 5 seed in most bracketologies. Virginia Tech, they're either projected as a 10 seed or the first 4 out. And they take on a Duke team that we'll be talking about in our final segment with Conor O'Neill of Devils Illustrated later today. But for now, we're going to cut the break. When we come back, Joey Keller joins us to talk about the NFL carousel, including Dan Quinn's new cast of coaches and the AFC North looking very, very different. All this and more on the Fast Lane. I'm TJ Wilkerson, and this is the Fast Lane with Ed Lane, 93.3 FM, 1320 AM Lynchburg, or on the VTRN Sports app.
For the perfect VW SUV. One size doesn't fit all, though, and that's why Volkswagen has an SUV for everyone. From the compact and affordable Volkswagen Taos to the tech-packed Tiguan and the spacious Volkswagen Atlas. No matter which one fits your lifestyle, you'll love the comfort, performance, and safety. Stop by Terry Volkswagen on Forest Road in Lynchburg or check us out online at terryvw.com. Terry Volkswagen. You'll love our cars.
Have you been hit by the winter doldrums? Are you itching for a place with more than a couple hours of daylight? Start your journey to a warm weather escape with us. Scuba classes are forming right now at Aquatrack Adventures. We can have you ready for a warm, relaxing excursion to a sunny tropical destination, including our spring getaway to sunny Florida. Take the first step. Call Aquatrack Adventures on Mill Lane in Salem and visit our website at aquatrackadventures.com to sign up for the certification or your trip.
Hey, small to medium business owners, if you're frustrated with slow IT support, high costs, or paying for services you just don't use, it's time for a change. Hi, I'm Colt with We Fix Stupid Computers. We provide reliable on-site and remote support tailored for businesses just like yours. And we go beyond just fixing problems. We empower your staff with real tech knowledge so they can work smarter every day. From repairs to training to full IT support, we save you time, stress, and money. Call We Fix Stupid Computers, 434-525-8590, where smart support meets real savings.
new year can mean new changes in your life. But you know what will never change? The great deals that you get on InsaneRadioDeals.com. And we don't just feed your taste buds, but we feed your adventurous side, your hobbies, your interests, with great rates on Rise Up Climbing Passes, Aquatrek Adventures, and Cross-White Athletics Club. Or if you're a sports nerd like me, we've got gift certificates for a SeaOfRed.com and BNC Sports located at River Ridge Mall. All this and more at InsaneRadioDeals.com.
The phrase du jour that we get to use on this TrostLaw.com Fast Take is right where they need to be. We're referencing it because if you need financial services, the Farmers Bank of Appomattox is right where you need to be, which is where we're doing it. But Virginia Tech men's basketball, the Hokies are right where they need to be, entering Saturday's showdown against Duke. 11:30 airtime, VTRN Sports app. They're 5-4 in ACC play. Duke is a team they'd love to beat. It would do wonders for their resume, but having gotten back above 500 in ACC play, they've got a little wiggle room.
UVA coach Ryan Odom recently joined the Fast Lane to talk about how his team will look different from a Tony Bennett-led team.
It is going to look different in JPJ. Shots are going to go up quicker. It's just the way that we play. We're going to crash the offensive glass. That's going to look a little bit different. It's not to say that coaches' teams didn't crash. They did, but they had a very specific way of doing it that's different from the way that we'll do it. I think it's going to be fun for the fans to see a new style in here. And again, the goal is winning. And so whatever we have to do to make sure that is the number one important thing, we're going to do that.
Listen to Fast Lane weekday afternoons 5 to 6 p.m. on VTRN Sports, 93.3 FM, 1320 a.m., the VTRN Sports app, and open your smart speaker. Ask VTRN Sports.
The Virginia Talk Radio Network reaches more people than any other Lynchburg-based media company. Call Melinda at 434-534-8500. Let us tell your story.
Step into the Fast Lane 24/7 at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, back to the Fast Lane.
A lot of people will say all-star games just aren't what they used to be. And I would honestly agree, especially when it comes to the NFL Pro Bowl, which, by the way, whether it's the same or not, you can still listen to it on VTRN Sunday at 3 p.m., 93.3 FM, 1320 a.m. Lynchburg, or on the VTRN Sports app. But no, the Pro Bowl just isn't the same. At least I can watch the NBA All-Star game. And I can watch the dunk contest, 3-point challenge, skills challenge, so forth, and then watch NBA players goof around and put up nearly 200 points just for the fun of it. And at least in MLB All-Stars, right, I can watch the home run derby and enjoy that a lot, actually. I will say this. I think MLB has the best All-Star format. I do. I enjoy everything about the MLB All-Stars. NBA All-Stars would be second. NHL, I'd put right there at third. And Pro Bowl, well, that's probably number 4 if we're being truth be told. I mean, that's the last pro league. I'm wondering if our next guest, who's about to join us, we're going to get into NFL coaching carousels here in a second. But our next guest, Joey Keller, who we've brought on in the past for the Fast Lane. He's got a lot of great ideas, a lot of great opinions, a lot of great takes. And nobody better for these kind of takes than from the chief, formerly at the Light down here in Lynchburg, now at the NFL in New York. First off, Joey, are you staying warm, man? Is the snow worse where you're at than it is in Lynchburg? Because it took me forever to dig my car out of the snow.
I can't imagine there are a lot of places that have it worse snow-wise. And to be honest, no, I'm not staying warm.
Oh, man.
It is so cold up here. I moved down south at the end of high school. I spent a year in Indiana before moving here. And I think the 5 years I spent down south just fully changed how my body functions. I'm going back down to Florida for a trip here after the Super Bowl. And I'm just counting down the days because it is freezing. However, the one thing is luckily living in New York City, I don't have to worry about a car. So I did not have to dig a car out of the snow.
That's good.
So I got you there.
You got me beat there, man. Hey, my fiance is currently up north in Michigan, and she says it's still snowing up there. So I can't imagine up north winter weather. I've experienced it a little bit. I can't imagine living in it, but
Not ideal.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm much more of a, sit in a chair near the beach and, get a nice tan. More, I guess for me, I'm very Irish, so it's more of just getting burnt. But I'd still take that over whatever this is. So,
you brought up.
Oh well,
yeah, absolutely. We've been talking about up north, AFC North. We'll start there. Did a near 360 with coaching changes. I know it's old news, Harbaugh and Tomlin leaving the Ravens and Steelers, but did you ever imagine that they would both leave in the same offseason?
Maybe kind of. The timing of it's definitely, I guess, ironic. I had been saying for a few years that I thought that Baltimore needed to move on from John Harbaugh. And, the people up here in New York, I work with a lot of Giants fans. I interact with a lot of Giants fans. They're ready to throw the parade now. And, I think that they were probably the most appealing job, at least roster-wise, in this head coaching cycle. Maybe Baltimore just because they have Lamar, and then Buffalo, a late addition. But, John Harbaugh, it seems like over the last 5 years or so, has become notorious for blowing leads in games, games that it looks like they had wrapped up at one point or another. And then when the clock hit 0, Baltimore was on the losing end. And I get it. A lot of playoff appearances. He won a Super Bowl, but, that Super Bowl was, I believe, 13 years ago now, 12 or 13 years. It's not like it was 2 years.
2012, right? The last one when the power went out and Kaepernick was quarterback at the Niners.
Down in the Superdome.
Yeah.
With Pro Bowler Joe Flacco on the team. Congrats to him on making the Pro Bowl today. I actually got my Pro Bowl invite today. I don't know what position I'm playing yet, but they're just handing them out to everyone. So I got mine today. Very excited.
Okay.
So you don't even have to be on a team to make the Pro Bowl anymore. But yeah, some of these Pro Bowl selections, I'm confused. But hey, congrats to the Browns. We had 4 Pro Bowl QBs on the team at the same time earlier this year. We won 5 games. If Dylan Gabriel gets a late addition, we will have as many Pro Bowl quarterbacks as we do wins. But yeah, back to the coaching cycle. I get that Tomlin has been on the hot seat forever. A lot of Pittsburgh fans wanted to move on from him. As a Browns fan, I wanted him gone just because, he kind of terrorized us for a while. So did Harbaugh. I think Tomlin was really the glue that held that team together because you look at some of the rosters. We all know how important the quarterback position is in football. When's the last time they had a good quarterback? Ben Roethlisberger, his last few years really took a big step back, sharp decline. And then, it was a rotating door of Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky, washed up Russell Wilson, now washed up Aaron Rodgers. And it's like, the rest of the offense wasn't great either. A lot of those years, the O-line was filled with holes. They've had DK Metcalf and George Pickens, not at the same time, but outside of that, the wide receiver room's been thin and always had a good defense, which that's a credit to Tomlin. He always emphasized that. So I don't think he was really the problem there. And I was really shocked by the McCarthy hire. I don't know. It was kind of a weird one. I just felt like there were so many good young up-and-coming coordinators in this cycle, and a lot of them will not be getting jobs this year. And instead, it seems like most of the hires were, these previous head coaches who are kind of part of like the old guard. And I don't want to say they're washed up because that's for each person to debate themselves, but, guys who were successful, but a long time ago.
Yeah.
Plus Kevin Stefanski. So I don't know. It was definitely a crazy. This was one of the craziest coaching carousels I've ever seen. I can't remember the last time we had 10 coaches get fired. But man, it was something. You know, a third of the league is going to have a new coach next year.
You know, you mentioned Stefanski. I know you were up and down with him in Cleveland. Todd Monken now taking his place. Let me ask the first question. Was Stefanski a good coach in a bad place? And do you think he'll succeed with the Falcons team that has great young depth? And number two, is Todd Monken the right guy for Cleveland? Or should they have gone to Jim Schwartz or somebody else with head coaching experience?
You know, the Stefanski firing was extremely debated. It seemed like the fan base was very torn. I would say it was maybe 60-40 in favor of moving on. I think he was part of the problem in Cleveland. I'm not going to sit here and say it was all his fault. I'm also not going to pretend that the last 2 years he had a great roster. You know, you want to talk about a revolving door of quarterbacks. There's no place like the Browns for that. But I think that he in part dug his own grave a little bit. You know, despite what he has said, you know, since he got fired, and even after taking the Atlanta job, he has spoken a lot, trying to walk back a lot of things. You know, he's come out and was very vocal saying, I was against going out and getting Deshaun. You know, I wanted to do this, and the ownership and the front office did that instead. He and Andrew Berry were very, very close in Cleveland. You know, and I'm not going to sit here and act like we have a great GM and a great owner. I think that both of them needed to go. I personally said, I think the best thing the Browns could have done is completely gut it. You know, new coach, new GM. And, you know, for a while it was looking like we had a chance at a top pick to go get a quarterback, preferably Mendoza. That ship sailed. And unfortunately, there's nothing you can do about an owner, no matter what. To me, it's like your coach was up in the air, your GM is up in the air, and I think that Andrew Berry, the general manager, has made a lot more mistakes than Stefanski had. And I think that this was kind of a similar situation that we saw in Buffalo, where the GM just says, nope, it was all the head coach. He's gone. You know, let me get a good coach and I'll make this right. You know, kind of scapegoated in a way. I do think he should have been fired, but, you know, that brings us to Todd Monken, which I don't understand that at all. This is a guy that Baltimore fans couldn't stand as an OC, and now we're promoting him to head coach. The whole Jim Schwartz thing, I didn't want him as our head coach. I thought that, you know, he was a good DC. I really wanted to go get like a young offensive mind.
Yeah.
I guess I got half of what I wanted.
So you wanted Mike McDaniel in a way. Someone like Mike McDaniel.
I didn't really want McDaniel. You know, I'm out here, I'm like, I wanted one of three OCs from the NFC West, whether that was Mike LaFleur from the Rams or Clint or Clay Kubiak from the Seahawks or 49ers.
Yeah.
You know, and I was even starting to get on board with Nate Shieldhouse, the passing game coordinator from the Rams. I fully trust that McVay, Shanahan offensive coaching tree. I've wanted to get in there for a while because I feel like those guys do great. You know, look at Kevin O'Connell up in Minnesota, what he's been able to do. And then I was really starting to get interested in Grant Udinski, the young OC from Jacksonville. And it seems like whoever was doing the hiring and interview process just made this as messy as possible. So, you know, they say we want Jim Schwartz back as DC no matter what, if he's not head coach. And then you bring him all the way to the finals as head coach. All these other guys pull out, and basically everyone's saying, okay, it looks like Jim Schwartz is going to be the coach. And then last minute, they're like, actually, we're going Todd Monken. it makes me think that, okay, so what we did was we're going to try to keep Jim Schwartz with us by almost hiring him as head coach, which I think really did the opposite, and burned him and made him upset. And now he says that he's done and he's going somewhere else, which I understand. And you don't even get one of these young guys who basically said, never mind, I'm going to pass on, being your coach because I'm not even hired yet and you're already telling me how to do things, which a lot of coaches don't like that. Not to mention, we are already handcuffed considering what coach wants to come here when our ownership and GM has a history of kind of overstepping the head coach and trying to do too much and making a lot of bad decisions, especially in recent years. So this whole thing just seemed like a disaster from the beginning. And I don't know how I feel about this hire. I'm not a fan of it. I just don't really see a way this works out. Everyone knew that we could get the greatest coach ever, and it would be a miracle to make the playoffs next year. We're a few years away. We still need a quarterback. I'm not sold on Shador. I don't care that he's a Pro Bowler. I did analytical research. You tally up all the different quarterback stats, and I did it for quarterbacks with a minimum of 6 starts. Add everything up, and the 2 worst quarterbacks in the NFL, actually 2 of the 3 worst. The worst was Shador, and third worst was Dylan Gabriel. So who knows what the near future of the Browns is going to be like? I don't know.
Joey?
Not very optimistic. We'll see what happens after the draft and through training camp. Usually I find some fake optimism in late August, and that usually gets ripped away by about week 2. So we'll see.
Joey Keller from the NFL offices, NFL statistician, as you just heard him break down numbers on who were the worst quarterbacks in 6-game start minimum in the NFL. Joey, we'll pivot over to the Commanders as they sort of cleaned up the house around Dan Quinn, sort of promoted inside. They promoted David Blau to offensive coordinator and then hired Durante Jones for DC as recently after getting rid of both their defensive coordinator and then their OC in Kingsbury. What are your thoughts on that? And will these hires either prove that Dan Quinn is the head coach that Washington fans believe him as, or if he struggles with this, will this expose a little more of Dan Quinn than people realize?
Yeah, I mean, Dan Quinn, after year 1, was seen as a hero in the DMV for sure, taking them all the way to the conference championship. Jaden Daniels looked like a future star. And then this year was a huge, snap back to reality. In terms of offense, the Kingsbury, I don't want to call it a firing because they say that it was a mutual parting of ways. That's usually hard to know right away. Usually the truth will come out in the years down the road. Defensively, I feel like that hire was much less important because Dan Quinn is a stellar defensive coordinator. You saw it with the Cowboys, saw it with the Seahawks back in the Legion of Boom. So I think he'll really be calling the shots defensively for the most part. Maybe, I don't know if he'll be calling plays, but it's going to be his defense.
Yeah.
And then hiring David Blau, it's really hard to evaluate coordinator hirings by guys who haven't been coordinators before because you don't really know, what their plan is.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, he's a former quarterback. He worked with quarterbacks. It's kind of like a time will tell thing. I think Washington is going to be very reliant on the health of Jaden Daniels and some of his supporting cast. They got hit by injuries everywhere.
Yeah.
Austin Eckler, Terry McLaurin was banged up a lot of the year. So health is obviously going to play a huge part in this. They say the best ability is availability. So we'll see what happens there. But if they're not in the playoff picture at the end of the year next year, Dan Quinn's seat will definitely be very hot because he set the bar so high in year one that he's almost making it more difficult on himself now.
Absolutely. And the bar is always high when Joey Keller joins in on the fast lane with his knowledge and breaking down everything. Joey, thank you for joining us here on the fast lane. Stay warm the best you can, man. And can't wait to hear who you have in the Super Bowl in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, make sure that y'all are tuned in. It's going to be a fun one.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joey, for joining us here. Joey O. Keller, that's the best way to follow him for all his takes on Twitter. When we come back, we are going to preview Duke and Virginia Tech with Conor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated. Then talk about Cooper and Con. Two former teammates went at it last night and both had career highs. All this and more when we come back on the Fast Lane.
Motor Mile, your trusted dealer serving Southwest Virginia and surrounding areas for over 50 years. With more selection, more value, and more finance options. Plus, your trade is worth more. Shop local and save more with straightforward pricing, plus exceptional service and selection. Your search ends at the Motor Mile. Choose from over 900 quality pre-owned vehicles, plus a massive selection of new car brands in Southwest Virginia. Honda, Hyundai, Toyota, Subaru, Kia, Chevrolet, Mitsubishi, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram. Plus the used car superstore. 11 new car brands, 900 used vehicles at one location. Volume selling means volume pricing, and we've got more than any other dealer in the area. The Sheeler Motor Mile delivers choices. Here's the difference. Sheeler owns the finance company and makes getting approved for credit simple and easy on the Motor Mile. Flexible financing options for every budget to get you on the road fast. Get more on the Sheeler Motor Mile with a certified friendly staff and no games, no gimmicks. I-81 exit 118C in Christiansburg. Call 866-SHEELER1. Always open at Sheeler.com.
Hi, I'm Chuck from Aquatrack Adventures in Salem. The Virginia Talk Radio Network and InsaneRadioDeals.com have helped our company grow by sharing our company's message throughout Central and Southside Virginia. The gift cards and experiences sold on InsaneRadioDeals.com have brought us many new customers. If you're a business that wants to grow with a message that resonates and gets results, I highly recommend InsaneRadioDeals.com and the Virginia Talk Radio Network. Simply put, it works.
At the Farmers Bank of Appomattox, we believe personal banking should be as rooted in the community as you are. Whether managing your business banking, saving for your family's dream home, or juggling daily expenses with our mobile app, we offer tailored solutions with a local touch. Experience the security of a bank that knows your name and the convenience of modern technology. Visit us today to grow your financial future right here at home. The Farmers Bank of Appomattox, your community, your bank, your future.
Looking for everything happening in and around Central Virginia that used to be in the morning paper? Start your day at the LynchburgPortal.com. Get the latest news updates from Bill Trevero, plus up-to-date weather from VTRN's own in-house meteorologist, Matt Ferguson. So you're always in the know before you head out the door. Want to listen on the go? Stream classic hits on Rewind 103.9. Get breaking local news on WIQO, or catch the best sports talk and play-by-play on VTRN Sports, powered by ESPN Radio. All right from the portal. Looking to save? Check out Insane Radio Deals for great local discounts, or explore local podcasts featuring the voices and stories that make our community special. Plus, connect with local businesses through the Lynchburg Business Alliance directory and stay in the loop on the latest events from Lynchburg Tourism. It's all right here. Local news, weather, sports, deals, and more at the LynchburgPortal.com. Your gateway to everything Lynchburg.
Step into the Fast Lane 24/7 at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, back to the Fast Lane.
Lucky for us here in Virginia, we're expecting only to get 1 inch of snow, which thank God, because we're still recovering from the last storm here. Our parking lot here at the radio station just got cleared up, as a matter of fact. So it was a lot easier to drive in here to get ready for the Fast Lane here on 93.3 FM, 1320 AM Lynchburg. Whether or not we are able to get into the studio or not, we still got a lot of great content for you here on VTRN now powered by ESPN, including a matchup that will be on our airwaves. Virginia Tech Hokies back at Castle, taking on the number 4 team in the nation this weekend, weather permitting. But the craziest thing to me, I was on Twitter earlier today as I get ready to introduce our next guest, and top 10 best coaches in the country list came up today from Field of 68. And on that list was not John Shire. Despite the fact that Duke has 8 or more quad 1 wins, they're rolling with only 1 loss right now, 19-1. And maybe their first half play might not show it, but the way they finish games, they're showing like a top true national championship contender. And I'm wondering if Conor O'Neill will agree with me here from Devils Illustrated. First off, Conor, welcome to the Fast Lane. Thank you for joining us. And number 2, did you see that list on Twitter today?
I saw the list. I can't rattle off all 10 of the coaches that were on there. I know the general gist of it, and there aren't many I would disagree with. I try to, I don't know how to phrase this politically correctly. I don't know. It just seems like it's a subjective list. And when you introduce that word into making college basketball lists, when it comes to coaching acumen, Duke is always going to be discounted a little bit.
Yeah.
I didn't think that would still be the case moving from Coach K to Shire, but it kind of has just developed that way. So it's kind of funny. I think John might have to win a national championship or 2 before he actually gets recognized as a legitimately good or great coach by some national media people.
Absolutely. But I mean, his recruiting is on point. He's bringing the talent there. Eventually a title will come, maybe this year, potentially. Do you see a title in the works with this crew compared to last year where you felt like they should have won it if they don't choke the final 8 minutes against Houston that ultimately led to their defeat in the Final Four?
Yeah, TJ, I like the way you phrased that. Is, you can kind of look at last year's team, and if you remove what we just watched last night, if you were able to watch the Cooper and Kahn show in Dallas, if you kind of take all that out of your mind, even, you can look at last year's team and say they should have won the national championship. I mean, 5 starters that are all drafted, just some real quality depth behind them, 8 or 9 man rotation. That's a team that, goes right hand in hand with the 99 Duke team of some of the best teams to never have won it. And then I look at this year's team and it's like, I don't know if I'm looking at this year's team saying they should be the team that wins it all. I don't think even, another year from now, we'll look back on this year's team and say, man, that team was so talented, and for them not to win it all, it's really a disappointment. But I think this team can win it all. And that's really, like, outside of once every maybe 10 years or 20 years at Duke, you get a team like that. You have a team that you say should have won it all. I think you can kind of say that about Zion Williamson's team in 2019. But I think this team has all the potential to win it all. I mean, they're not going to play last year's Florida team or last year's Houston team, even though they beat this year's version of Florida, and this year's version of Houston looks really, really good. But this team is different in some ways. Its star is different. He's a more polished scorer than Cooper Flagg was coming into college. Cam Boozer does everything efficiently and effectively. So, yeah, I think they're right there in that bracket of teams with Michigan and Arizona and probably UConn, where you're thinking, yeah, if they win the national championship, that's going to be no shock to anybody.
I agree. You've got Starr, who defensively is a great player all around and goes great with Caleb Foster on the court, I feel like. And a guy that had to step up and has been a secondary for Cameron Boozer in scoring, Isaiah Evans. And I always felt like Zay was a great player, even last year when he was forced to come off the bench, because we know that cast last year was loaded. Do you feel like Isaiah Evans is the key piece this year into helping Duke, not just in this game against Virginia Tech, which we'll talk about in a second, but do you feel like he's the piece to get them even further this year? Or is there another player that you've seen in your game coverage of Duke that people need to keep an eye out for?
I think he's a key piece. I don't know if you can put it all on him as the secondary option because we saw Caleb Foster in the game at Louisville take over and get downhill and score 20 points. And the numbers escape me, but I think the vast majority of those points came in the second half when they were completing the comeback. We saw, to bring up Louisville again, but the game earlier this week, Monday night, we saw Pat Gongba score 10 points in 2.5 minutes that really accelerated Duke to that 31-point blowout to start the second half. So I understand the discussion of, well, Duke needs to have a second option behind Cameron Boozer. I just think that second option can be somebody different. And I think that's one of the strengths of this team is, if Isaiah Evans is being locked up and maybe isn't hitting his shot, then you can go to somebody like Gongba, or you can get it was a lot of garbage time points, and he has not been consistent. But even Nick Homenia scored 14 points on Monday night. So, and if he's going to hit corner threes, then this team's ceiling gets a lot different. So, I think Isaiah is the most likely secondary option on most nights and in most matchups. I just think he doesn't have to be your end all be all to be the guy that, when Cam Boozer is only scoring, quote unquote, only 18 points or 20 points or something like that, then you have somebody else stepping up and carrying a little bit more of the load.
Conor O'Neill joining us here from Devils Illustrated today. Conor, first off, are you going to be able to make the trip to Blacksburg, or are you staying behind for the Wake Forest Deacons against State, since you're also doing Devils Illustrated?
It was, even before I knew about any of the weather forecast, I was going to have to stay behind and cover Wake's home game, even though their season's kind of slipping away from them, and Duke is obviously going to be right there. It wouldn't have made much sense for me to go out of town when the team I cover is in town.
That makes sense. Well, do you think when you glance at VT and Mike Young and the team that's developed here, does this scream trap game, or do you feel like this is just another game where, hey, Duke will probably be down in the first half, but then they'll do what they usually do in the second half, like they did against Cal, like they did against Wake Forest, come back and win by double digits?
Yeah, I think this is a tough matchup. And now the caveat here is I've said that before. Like I think there were probably a few games last year when Duke was rolling that I was sitting here saying that's going to be tough, and then they go out there and win by like 35, and I'm just like, oh, okay, well, shows what you know. I just, to me, the kind of what I'm putting some stock into is Duke has been dominant inside against the last 3 or 4 teams they've played. I think the combined points in the paint against Wake Forest and Louisville was like 90-26 on Saturday and Monday last week. And all due respect, obviously, I mean, I cover Wake Forest, so I know them a little more intimately. And all due respect to Louisville's front court, Virginia Tech's front court is so much better than both of those teams. I just have a hard time thinking that Duke will have this 30-point advantage on the interior like they have in the last few games. And then, the 3 games ago, Duke played Stanford, and that was, I think, Stanford's first game without Chisholm Okpara. Mm-hmm. And they're just so guard heavy even when he's healthy. And now that he's out for the year, they have to completely change the way they play. So I think between Toby Lawal, Christian Gerdak, and Amani Hansberry, Duke will not have the same type of just overloaded mismatches in the front court. And I think that, I'm not saying that the Virginia Tech front court is on the same level of Duke, because I don't know if anybody is on the same level of Duke with their front court power other than Florida. Yeah. But I do think that advantage that Duke has had in the last few matchups is just not going to be as exploitable as it has been lately.
Yeah, and a healthy Toby Lawal, that gives VT a little bit of advantage when he's healthy and he's in there getting doubles for this team. What do you think would be the better matchup in that case? Would you put Ngangba on Toby Lawal? Would you put Cameron or Caden on Lawal if you're John Shire? What's going through your mind if you're Shire?
I would see. It's funny because the last couple of years Duke has switched so much that I just say it doesn't really matter. It just matters for the start of a possession. But once teams start running ball screens, it doesn't really matter about matchups because Duke switches everything. But this year's Duke team does not switch 1 through 5. Shire has been very candid with us in explaining he's had to learn to not be as stubborn and sticking with what they've done defensively that's worked in the past, because that doesn't help this year's personnel necessarily. So I would think maybe it's better in Duke's case to match Boozer up against Hansberry and put Gongba, who's a little bit better of a, I don't want to say athlete, but he's a little longer. He can probably match up with Toby Lawal's. I mean, how many times it looks like he's jumping with a pogo stick. It just blows my mind. But I think Gongba can at least counter that a little bit better than Cam Boozer. And Cam Boozer is very much more a play through you type than play over you. And I don't know how you play over somebody with the length and athleticism that Toby has.
Conor O'Neill joining us here from Devils Illustrated as well as Deacon Illustrated, which he'll be covering this weekend in Raleigh. Conor, before we let you go, I want to pivot to football as finally the Mensa case concluded. After all that, you've got Mensa officially going to Miami, Cooper Barkate following behind. If you're Manny Diaz and athletic director Nina King, what do you feel like? What do you feel like you do in that scenario? Surely they're not completely helpless. I mean, they've got great players on there, but now a lot of guys came to Duke because they had Darian Mensa, they had Cooper Barkate coming back. You brought Nate Shepard back as your star running back. Like, what do you do in that scenario, Conor?
I think they basically played their hand. They took it to court. They proved that Duke would at least follow through somewhat on a contract that was signed and enforced. If I were them, I feel like I would have dragged it a little further. I would have at least tried to get to arbitration. But it was headed toward one inevitability all along, and that was settlement, and that was eventually Darian Mensa committing to Miami and playing football for Miami next year. Mm-hmm. And no matter what route we took to get there, it was always going to wind up painful for Duke. So it's painful for Duke right now, but they have however much money came their way in an undisclosed settlement to kind of dab their tears. Not that anyone's actually crying over there in Durham, but
right.
Yeah, to me, I don't want to say they're more interesting now than they would have been with Darian Mensa and Cooper Barkate in the mix, but it is quite the story now of what Duke does. They have a verbal commit from a San Jose State quarterback, Walker Eget. He needs a waiver to play football next year because he spent 5 years with San Jose State. So if he gets a waiver, he's almost without a doubt your starting quarterback. If he doesn't, then Duke is turning to a journeyman who's been at Stanford and North Alabama, or a redshirt freshman who didn't take a single snap last year. It's dicey. Mm-hmm. And then you're also thinking like, okay, how many carries can Nate Shepard physically take and we keep him healthy for an entire 12-game season? Because that's the focal point of Duke's offense right now on paper.
Absolutely. As Conor O'Neill has been kind enough to join us here on the Fast Lane. Conor, thank you for joining us, man. And we hope you stay warm and safe, as it looks like that storm's going to hit North Carolina harder than it is going to hit us here at UVA.
Yeah, we're. I think we're in this zone of boom or bust. I think I'm supposed to get either like 8 inches or maybe an inch. So we'll see how it goes. Thanks for having me on, TJ.
Absolutely. Thank you, Conor. That is all we have here for you guys in the Fast Lane. Now back to Harry and Freddie. and whatever comes your way for the rest of our schedule. Tomorrow, we got a big slate for you guys, basketball all around, starting with Duke and Virginia Tech, and then we carry on into NBA coverage. Thank you all for tuning in. Goodbye, so long. We'll see you next week for Around the Commonwealth with Ed being back in the studio.
Have ESPN Unlimited included at no additional cost. So head to activate.espn.com, follow the steps to get set up, and you are good to go. That's activate.espn.com. Sign into the ESPN app with the same account. Hit the watch tab, and as Dave would like to say, my friend Dave's a big time